We go. Week 9, guys. Indiana and Ohio State, the most impressive, unbeaten so far. How close is 1 and 2 for you, Brandon?
It's pretty close, but Indiana still has the win of the year in all of college football by going on the road and beating Oregon by double digits. Ohio State's schedule just hasn't quite panned out as far as the strength of schedule argument. We all expected Texas to be much, much better than what it is right now, and that would be one of their bigger wins potentially on that schedule so far. And if you look ahead also, the schedule for Ohio State doesn't really produce a lot of big opportunities for obvious like top 15 or top 10 wins. Meanwhile, Indiana continues to be able to just hang on to this and has a relatively easy schedule coming up as well. So if you're looking for more impressive wins for Ohio State, you might not be able to get one until the end of the season against Michigan. And who's to say Michigan will still be ranked at that point?
Yeah, Brandon, I'm with you. So last week in my top 12 that I do on Sundays, I had Indiana number 1 as well. But then I got to see the Buckeyes in person, and there's always that personal bias that comes like once you see them. Like it's hard when you're watching on TV, you can't really appreciate it, or when you're stacking up resumes where I had Indiana number 1. But there was a wow performance and a wow factor with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And this defense probably is the biggest story that we've seen. I mean, it's putting up there with historically great seasons through 7 games. It's through 7 games. Shout out to Chip Patterson, who told me this one earlier. The fewest amount of points allowed since the 93 Seminole team that won a national championship. You know, the pitch out that they shutted there in Madison. Granted, Wisconsin's not a very good football team. But this team, and Jeremiah Smith told us after the game, he said this year's team is better. It's really hard to argue with him against that. You know, if you really want to nitpick, maybe the offensive line, the run game. But what Julian Sayin is doing at the quarterback position, through 7 games, he's completing 80% of his passes, and he's stretching the ball down the field. This Buckeyes team looks primed and ready to repeat. Again, if you had Indiana number 1, not much pushback, but there is, for me, a personal bias. Having seen the Ohio State Buckeyes in person, they look to be the part of a national championship contender.
All right, so right now the Big Ten top heavy when it comes to some of their best teams. Maybe depth down the road is another conversation for a different day. Miami falls to 11 after the AP dropped them to 9. Now, full disclosure, if you're just new to this segment, first off, welcome, because Brandon's had Miami at number 1 before when others did not. But just take me through the thought process, Brandon, of the Canes where you had them outside the top 10.
I hate saying this, but it's like you can count on Mario Cristobal for one of these every year, and we got it now. Louisville doing so on the road. And listen, I mean, Carson Beck throwing 4 interceptions, a career high there. I don't think that's going to happen again this season, but who knows? And that's why Louisville won. They played big-time football. They had some great, by the way, play designs and plan offensively, especially in the first half of that game, that really caught Miami's defense off guard. And to me, other than Carson Beck just being a complete disappointment in that game, I was honestly quite shocked by the way Miami's defense played against that Louisville offense. I thought that Miami defense would do such a better job against them, even against the run game. As you're seeing on the screen there, allowing 119 rush yards, a lot of that coming off of some just very creative play designs by the Louisville Cardinals. This Miami team, you look at them in person, they look like a national championship type team. They're just bigger and faster than practically everybody, and they especially are in the ACC. But you're not going to be able to beat many opponents at all, even at home, if your quarterback's throwing 4 interceptions. And so Miami, they'll probably continue to rise in these rankings, but I'm not so sure you're ever going to see them at number 1 once again this year.
Yeah, that's a stretch. I thought you were too hard on the Canes, and here I am, a former Seminole, trying to defend the Miami Hurricanes. Because I do think Louisville's a really good football team. I think that's the thing that's been overlooked, is Miami was just getting hammered by the public, out there criticizing, saying, how can you lose this? Mario Cristobal loses this game again. I think Louisville's a really good football team. Now they're in the top 25. Jeff Brom had a magnificent game plan, but I was surprised too. The defense didn't deliver there. Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor weren't able to rattle Miller Moss, something I thought they could do. He had Isaac Brown over 100 yards rushing. And the Carson Beck interceptions, while they were bad and some of them bad decisions, some of the plays Louisville made on the ball actually were really super athletic, incredible plays. So I think you have to tip your cap here. And then I still think Miami has one of the better Rays stacked up against the other one-loss teams. Ole Miss comes to mind. Like, who has Ole Miss really beaten that's impressive as Miami's win over Notre Dame and having the state championship, run, where USF might be the most impressive of those Florida schools. That was a beatdown by Miami. So I still think Miami's resume stacks up. I think they'll have time to prove people, hey, that was a one-game anomaly. And if Carson Beck doesn't clean up his interceptions, maybe it won't be. But I think Miami is still a top 10 team.
Miami's loss kind of opened up the betting market with them, UVA, Georgia Tech, and even Louisville. So as of now, you guys have Miami down, and Marcello's got them out of the top 10. If we go to the Big 12, BYU comes in at number 15, one slot ahead of Texas Tech. They've got a November 8th showdown in Lubbock here. So for BYU and that win of the Holy War, Brandon, current placeholder or a sign of things to come when it comes to particularly these two teams in this conference?
I still think Texas Tech's the most talented team, but when we're talking power rankings and resume, BYU is just above Texas Tech at this point in the Big 12 as a result of their win this past week against Utah. I think Utah still is one of the more physical teams in the Big 12 in the way they played against them. And my goodness, true freshman quarterback Bear Bachmeier has been a revelation for BYU. And how about Kalani Sitake as head coach, man? They are 7-0 for the second straight season for only the first time in school history. He is just an incredible coach, completely underrated as a head coach. I believe at the end of the year, you're going to see Texas Tech and BYU in the Big 12 championship game if they continue to play this way. And as you said, November 8th, when they have a showdown, that is going to be epic. I can't wait to see that. You've got two gamers there at quarterback if Texas Tech can get Baron Morton back at quarterback. And, of course, Texas Tech is just monstrous in the trenches. But Arizona State showed us something this week by holding them to 7 points for most of that game before Tech was able to rally and Arizona State hung on. How to attack them, and I can't wait to see how BYU uses that game tape to prepare for that game in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, BYU's a team I don't think gets the respect that they deserve, especially this year. I mean, the amount we've talked about parity and how that gap is so small, and we've seen all these surprising losses. I think that's the answer. When people say, what is BYU's best win? You just say it's 7 wins in a row. The fact that they haven't had a slip up, and there'll be more opportunities for them against better teams. But I feel like you get dinged because you don't have this powerhouse differently than you do if you're, say, an Ole Miss or LSU, who has 2 losses. They're still in the top 25. They didn't really beat anybody. Tennessee, 2 losses, but they don't have any signature wins. Yes, they have good losses. Meanwhile, BYU has gone out there and been a consistent winner. So they'll have their opportunities. I think they deserve more respect. Bear Bachmeier has been a great story, and I totally agree with you. I think Kalani Sitake is one of the more underrated coaches in all of college football.
If you like the Cougars, you can still get them 6-1 to win the conference. And then lastly here, we've got Oklahoma, which is like the highest variance/discrepancy between AP poll and Marcello power rankings. 13 for the Sooners in the AP poll, but Brandon, for you, 22.
Yeah, there's just something happening there with OU. They're slipping a little bit in my eyes when I watch them on film. This past week, people are going to just look at the score against South Carolina and go, wow, that was a big, big win. But if you look at it on paper, it was one of the biggest mismatches going into last week. South Carolina had the worst allowed pressure rate on their quarterback in all of Power Conference football entering that game. Oklahoma had one of the top 3 pressure rate defensive lines going into that game. Absolute mismatch. That was going to be a double-digit win. So I almost have to erase that game in my mind a little bit because you could have just named your score in that. And the problem here for me is that OU's offense just isn't quite clicking the way it was 3 to 4 weeks ago before John Mateer's hand injury. And so I'm slipping them a little bit as a result of that, but also because of Texas continuing to show that they're just Jekyll and Hyde, and then for that matter, might be even worse than a lot of people are seeing right now compared to what we even saw 2 weeks ago when they beat OU. So I had to slip both OU and Texas, and they are affecting each other's resumes.
I honestly just put this on the rundown because I wanted to hear your answer, like what it was. And I think you make a great point because I don't think they're as dominant as people think they are. And I do think John Mateer, his thumb injury was a big story going into that Texas game, but he had 3 interceptions, but he's a little bit loose with the football. And I would look at Oklahoma with a lot of skepticism, especially with the strength of the schedule on the back end, and wonder where they finish. So I was curious to see that. Yeah, because I don't think they've been as dominant as their record shows they are. Not to mention the Michigan win doesn't look quite as good. After Michigan lost to USC, I agree with you. The Texas loss looks worse, and that wasn't even close. So I'm with you on a little bit of skepticism on Oklahoma.
They've led with their defense. You see it right there with the scores in the schedule, but they got to get that offense going if they're going to go further than that. Guys, certainly appreciate it. Make sure to check out the Cover 3 podcast. DK was on the road. He had Tom Fornelli in studio, Bud Elliott, and, of course, Chip Patterson. Scan the QR code and check them out.